everybody. Today, I am just really excited, and that is kind of fun because today we are interviewing David Blackmon, and I'll tell you what, he is not only a legend in my mind, he's a legend in his own mind.
In my own mind, yes.
In his own mind. And he is a Forbes author. He is a LinkedIn energy aficionado, and he's the editor over at the Shale Magazine. And welcome, David. We are so thrilled to have you on the Energy News Beat podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love what you do, and I love talking about energy. So this will be fun.
You know, I'll tell you what, being a fellow Texican, it is so much fun that when I was sitting there, and I follow your work all the time, and as I tease with Ryan Ray and a few of the other guys that are out there, I steal all your stuff and it becomes my ideas. And, you know, after you say it about 16 times, it becomes mine.
Yeah, so, I am a little repetitive, you know.
Oh, no, I'll tell you, it was kind of fun. For anybody that is not aware of David, you need to go follow him on LinkedIn, and all of that will be in the show notes. Your absurdity of the day makes my day. Every time, like you had one 2 days ago, Sunday's absurdity of the day, in case you missed it, big win. So where did you come up with energy absurdity of the day, David?
Well, I was I think it was last where I was paging through my LinkedIn feed. And, you know, of course, I follow all the great contributors there. And it was just one of those news days where nothing anybody in Europe or the IEA or the Biden administration or anywhere else was saying about energy made the slightest bit of common sense. Yeah, I had come across, I had just finished reading a post by David Ramsden Woods, who's just terrific. And it just occurred to me how utterly absurd everything around the energy space was. And I just decided, you know, I ought to pick one out every day and you know, do a little post on it each day. And since I've done that, it's been kind of amazing. The number of followers I have on LinkedIn has doubled, I noticed, since November. So apparently it's really striking a nerve with people.
It is, and well done. Did you vote to end Wednesdays 6 days ago as the Democrats who run the House Energy and Commerce? Yeah, I'm telling you, I just really enjoy your sense of humor on these things.
Well, yeah, that poor lady, I can't even remember her name. She's the representative from Illinois who sits on the House Energy and Commerce Committee that had that ridiculous hearing EOs last week. And
I actually saw that on Squawk Box Live, and I was about to throw up. So, you know.
Yeah, it was, I did too. I had watched it on Squawk Box, and then I went and looked for, you know, to see if they posted a tweet about it that I could, you know, use as a reference point. Because it's just so ridiculous, the whole price gouging thing and just these congressional hearings in general, unfortunately, and sadly for our society, have become these farcical exercises in demagoguery on both sides, really.
Right.
And nobody's actually there in any kind of a genuine search for the truth or serving any real public purpose. And it's just such a waste of everyone's time.
You know, it's all about, and it's not about the argument of going green or greener, as Jay Young says. You know, it's like he likes the word greener. And when you sit back and say, because we're always going to need oil and gas, and it's not about whether or not it's the energy policies that get everybody in the drive-throughs, was what I say. And we need to go to greener, but we need to do it with the lowest kilowatt per hour with the least amount of impact to the environment, which means we got to use fossil fuels.
Well, that's right. And you're right. I mean, we're going to have to use fossil fuels really throughout anyone who's alive today, throughout your lifetime. Fossil fuels are going to provide the majority of the energy mix. I mean, it's just physics. The laws of physics and thermodynamics are not going to allow these low energy density sources like wind and solar to ever replace these incredibly high energy density sources like oil, gas, and coal. And, you know, I understand the climate change arguments and all of that. And I like to say I'm just climate agnostic on this.
Right.
Just from an analysis and doing the math on energy and what we're going to need more of all of this, of everything.
Right.
And the credible projections that you see from places like the Biden administration's own Energy Information Agency tell us that, we're going to use rising volumes of oil and gas through 2050 at least. And, I hope I live to see that, probably won't, but, it is what it is. And that's the facts. And so what I try to do in my writing is just deal with reality instead of these narratives about,
Did I hear common sense?
Right. And common sense. And I mean, the other thing I want to be clear about too, though, is I'm not opposed to wind and solar. I mean, I think wind and solar are fine as long as they're properly managed. And of course, our problem in Texas is our grid managers. And unfortunately, our policymakers in Austin have not properly managed wind and solar as it's been integrated into this grid. And they're trying to treat it as base load, and it can't be treated as base load.
So, David, what do you think are our next steps on our way to, you're such a prolific author. What do you think our next steps? Because we can sit here and you and I are on the same page with everything.
Yeah.
How do you think we get to the nirvana? I mean, I think we need nuclear. I think we need all of those kind of things. What are your thoughts on how we change this around?
Well, I mean, at some point, I talked to Nick and interviewed him for the cover story of this next issue of Shale Magazine. He's the CEO of CNX Energy. And, he calls it a religious exercise, which is what it is. All this environmentalism, it's all a big religious exercise that is all based on matters of faith. And at some point, reality is going to have to take over in our energy policy world. And these governments are going to get voted out ultimately in the Western democracies if they don't, because people are not going to tolerate these constantly rising costs for energy that we've seen. And it's not just oil and gas. And Tesla had to invoke, what was it, a 14% price increase on its Model 3 last week. And that's after they had raised prices on other models. And it's because of the rising cost of minerals that they use in making the lithium ion batteries. And people are tolerate this level of inflation for so long. And I think in November, we'll see it really come home to roost for the Democrats in the United States. And if these European governments do not relent on this constant pushing of ever rising levels of renewables in their grids, which caused this energy crisis they're seeing right now in the first place.
Right.
And really provided a lot of incentive for Vladimir Putin to feel free to conduct this war in Ukraine. If they do not relent, they will all be taken out of office one way or another.
Right.
And in France, with the French Revolution, that could be a pretty violent exercise with the government. So, that's going to have to happen before any of this changes. All these narratives and the fantasies about wind and solar providing all our electricity, we're just going to have to discard that and really deal with the science and the math in a way that makes sense and in a way that makes the best sense for the environment. We have a system that works now.
Right.
We ought to be focused on energy efficiency and measures that promote using less energy by individuals. Up the system we have, which can still be done. I mean, why aren't we? We're talking about spending trillions and trillions of dollars on these new energy sources. That if we were spending that cleaning up the current system, well, there wouldn't be a problem. But it's just, I don't know. None of it makes any sense, and that's why the energy absurdity, I think, strikes such a nerve with people.
Oh, I think it's just, I get tickled at it because, one of these days, my goal is for you to write about one of my articles. and just have me as one of yours, you know, and I
You
would
make
have
too much sense.
oh no, I would have so much fun your list that, you know, that's my goal, you know, having Larry the Cable Guy retweet one of my tweets made my day. And I would
Boy, I bet
really
that
like
would.
to
That's
have,
never happened to me.
oh no, anyway, I can't wait to be on your absurdity of the day. And it's funny how many people you and I know in the industry back and forth. DRW was on several of my podcasts in the past,
Yeah.
and Arena Slav. And as the editor for Shale Magazine, that's a big deal. How much of your time is taken up with Shale Magazine?
Oh, it's maybe a quarter of my time. It's not that much, you know. I mean, and you know, I'm in such a unique situation personally.
Okay.
You know, I had 40 years in the industry. I had this incredible education in the industry while I was in it, because I was doing all of this policy related work for all these different companies. And, you know, now I'm semi-retired, working from home, and my whole job is to focus on and think about what's happening in the energy space. So when it comes time to do the writing that needs to be done and the editing that needs to be done, well, that's what I'm doing anyway. Right. And I don't have a lot of other responsibilities where job is concerned now. And my kids are grown, so
Yep.
You know. So it's just a lot of it is just so much that I'm in such a unique position in my personal life that it probably takes me a lot less time to do these things than it would take someone else.
How did you get started in the energy business?
You know, I had an interest in it really from childhood. My family has a little small farm in Goliad County in South Texas. I grew up in Beeville, Texas, South Texas. And we always had some oil and gas activity on the ranch or around it, you know, never any high dollar stuff, but it was also interesting to me. You know, I'd be able to watch rigs get set up and, you know, just see that stuff happening from a young age. And when I got an accounting degree in college, and that's a story in and of itself why I did that. But I got my first job out of college was with working for Oscar Wyatt at Coastal States in Houston. And, you know, and I came out of college right as Jimmy Carter was about to sign the windfall profits tax into law, and spent 5 years as a windfall profit tax specialist, which I'm still bitter about. You know, and
Jimmy Carter or being a windfall tax?
Both. I'll never stop being bitter about the Carter presidency and all the insane energy policy that came out of that disaster. You know, but and so like the first 15 years of my career, I was basically an accountant in accounting and a supervisor, and then I made a out of replacing guys who were retiring, guys like me.
Right.
And so the first guy I replaced was the guy who had been our regulatory audit and a regulatory affairs manager. And so I went into the regulatory affairs gig, and then I met our lobbyist down in Austin, our government affairs guy at Burlington Resources was the company I was at. And I decided I wanted his job. He was getting ready to retire. And I thought, well, gee, I need to get to know his boss. Right. And I did. And so I replaced him and got into government affairs. And, you know, so the last 20 years of my career was spent working all these big policy issues at the Department of Interior, at the EPA, at the Energy Department, and in various states that we were producing in.
Right.
And it was such a wonderful education to be able to do that and be involved in all of those things. And I participated in a bunch of industry-wide projects and helped to lead them. And so it was just, it was a great way to spend a career, I think. And I never dreamed when I was coming out of college that I would be able to do anything like that.
Where did you go to college at?
I went to Texas A&I University in Kingsville, which is now Texas A&M Kingsville, and then also the University of Texas. And nice. I got a bachelor's degree in accounting in 1979. And So
Wow.
it was, so when I was a sophomore in college and I had to finally decide what I was going to major in, I started out as a music major. I was a drummer, and then realized I couldn't learn any of those other instruments, so that wasn't going to work. And I remember distinctly reading a copy of U.S. News and World Report and an article that talked about how the United States had a severe shortage of accountants. Yep. And it was the hot thing to major in. And I was good at math. And I thought, well, shoot, I could do that. So that's how I decided to major in accounting. That's literally all the thought I gave to it.
I went to Oklahoma State and nothing about accounting sounded good to me.
Well, it's not the most entertaining subject. Let's put it that way.
I was more interested in partying than I was in school. And
well, so, me too. Yeah.
Oklahoma State, I should have gone in the military instead of going to Oklahoma State.
That's a great school.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. In fact, I was there when Gundy was there, and you were only, I think, 2 years older than me because I graduated in 81. So, and I graduated in 81 back. Since this morning, it was the highest inflation rate since 1981.
1981. That's right, man.
I've got my Biden sticker somewhere that I need to go. I did that,
I bought 100 of them and I've used them all up, putting them on gas pumps. I'm that guy that's doing that.
Oh, I love it. I've some good friends of mine gave me some stickers, and I've got the Biden. Where's Brandon? Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
on my laptop.
Oh, what a disaster this guy is. It's just stunning. I never dreamed, I knew he would not be a good president because he, as a senator, was wrong about literally everything, every issue he was on the wrong side of, and particularly on foreign policy. But I just never, I thought he would at least have some advisors surrounding him,
right,
that might lead to avoid some disastrous decisions. And unfortunately, it feels like all his advisors are even more inept than he is. And so our Secretary of Energy is a great example of that, unfortunately.
I don't even know where to begin. Your absurdity of the day just got about 9,000 pounds if we printed it out, if you covered all of it. So
one on her, that's what it would weigh. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Boy, I tell you, she's something. She's really something. And I actually, when she was governor of Michigan,
right,
I was working for a company that had production up there, and it felt like actually kind of knew what she was doing. I didn't feel like she was a terrible governor.
Right.
And, her staff was very smart. And I just, man, she knows nothing about what she's doing in her current job. And it's really a bad situation.
Well, when the Biden administration came out, right when they were doing the infrastructure bill, they snuck in natural gas is renewable and nuclear is now available for funding under the greener funding. Mm-hmm. And then it turns around that COP26 also snuck that in there. And I'm not sure if they got it from the Colorado Senate Bill 181 or if they got it from the infrastructure bill or if they got it from, any of those kind of things. So then COP26 got it in there. And now the EU has approved natural gas as a renewable, and then, nuclear and everything else. And I'm loving seeing this whole paradigm shift. The left wing had their head explode on that. And I really enjoyed that. It was like,
which just baffles me. Doesn't that baffle you? Why are the greenies opposed to nuclear? Man, I know, we had 3 Mile Island and that killed the US industry. Then we had Chernobyl and that killed the global industry. But man, it's been so long since those things. And and if you're really truly, if your goal is really truly to cut carbon emissions in the energy sector, the most scalable alternative to fossil fuels is nuclear. And it's not even close.
No, it's not.
And this continued fright rhetoric around nuclear. It's
Right.
you know, the technology is so much better now as when those accidents happened. And I really think they're going to have to really get behind nuclear to have any chance of displacing any significant percentage of fossil fuels. Yeah, but to your point about all the activity about various government entities, you know, now beginning to slowly classify natural gas as green for, you know, for investing purposes in the EU and subsidies by the federal government. What I think is really happening here is that these policymakers in the free world, in the Western democracies, are beginning to wake up to the folly of these horrible decisions they've been making for the last 20 years. But they can't stop the rhetoric yet, okay? And so you see this slow creeping move to now say, oh, well, you know, yes, we can fund natural gas and yeah, we can fund nuclear but we can't say it. We got to keep doubling down on wind and solar and electric vehicles, even though we know that's not really going to happen the way we say it, because if they don't, then you talk about the environmentalist head exploding. Oh my God, it would just be carnage in the political.
Remember Monty Python?
Oh, yes. I just love those guys. Yeah. I'm so old, I remember all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, we ought to come up with our own Monty Python skit for the Energy Strong commercial, you know, something like that from those guys.
Do a parody of the old Ministry of Silly Walks. Remember that skit they did? If we could adapt that to the U.S. Department of Energy or the EU, you know, or their Green Deal and all that.
What was the one? It was the international twit contest where the guy the winner they killed themselves, like they couldn't even jump over matchsticks, and the winner was one that backed over himself, and he's laying under there, and they have the coffins on it, you know. And I can see us now with a new version of that with a Tesla. Who's going to back over themselves with a Tesla to win the Monty Python internet? I'm sorry, we're regressing here.
That would work. I think we've got a concept going here.
So you bring up all these great points with the hypocrisy. We're talking hypocrisy.
Yeah, well, gosh, where to begin on that? You know, to me, the biggest, the most, and the dirtiest bit of hypocrisy in the energy space right now is this intentional ignorance among all the proponents of this energy transition, this intentional ignoring
ignorance.
Intentional ignorance,
I like it.
Or pretense of ignorance, really. They know it, but they pretend not to. I
like that better, PI.
Yeah, there you go. And you know, of what happens in China.
Yeah.
And so to me, the biggest hypocrisy, you know, is that, you know, intentional pretense of ignorance about all of those terrible things that happen in obtaining those minerals and processing them and moving them.
Yep.
You know, that these renewable industries have to have, and electric vehicles have to have.
Right.
And it's all because it makes them more price competitive states in the Western world. And these are atrocities that are being committed in these countries, particularly in China, but also in parts of Africa, that we should not be intentionally ignorant about. And even more is the news media going along with the gag, right? And not reporting on any of that and not focusing on any of that. It's really despicable, frankly. And I think we should all be ashamed in our country for allowing it to continue for so long.
I like the way you say that, because I have lost all faith in all politicians and all media outlets.
Me too.
I'm tired of it. And
yeah, you mentioned watching Squawk Box, right? And you know, I can watch CNBC. I can watch the Brett Baer's report on
Yep.
Fox.
But
I can
even
watch a few things, but most of
Hannity, I can't do Hannity because
oh,
he's so.
Hannity, Hannity
I'm
is awful. He's the
he,
worst.
he is. He's horrible. And it'd be like me trying to have you on a podcast so I could hear about you, but then I keep cutting you off.
Right.
I'm like,
It's
did you see?
unbelievable.
Did you see Hannity with Sean Penn the other day?
No, I see what I do is I see clips of those things,
Okay.
right, on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I don't ever watch any of those shows live. Ever.
That was the only one that I actually went. He actually listened to Sean Penn. I'm not a Sean Penn fan, but Sean Penn actually went to Ukraine. That's why I watched it. And Hannity was almost human during that time.
Yeah. Well, how about that? But the other problem with Hannity is he tends to do the same show over and over, or the same opening monologue over and it's same points in it. I talk about me being repetitive. He's the most repetitive person I've ever seen in my life. I used to actually listen to his radio show because I like listening to talk radio but I got to where I couldn't even stand to do that. I just can't stand the sound of his voice anymore.
Oh no. That's what my wife says about me. We've been married 35 years and
hey, I've been married for 41 years. Imagine how my poor wife feels about my voice.
Oh, I know. My wife's such a saint for putting up with me that it's absolutely miserable. So we talked about the hypocrisy of everybody, everything. We talked about where we're going and what's it going to take for the oil and gas industry? Because we have to teach them. We have to teach people how to go through. And your absurdities of the day they're fun, by the way. And I really enjoy them. The folks at Energy Strong are doing a great job reaching out there and trying to tell everybody else. But, we got to get the younger generation. How are we going to get the next generation of energy experts in here?
It's hard, it's in our industry, unfortunately, has just always been awful with communicating. It's a battle I fought for 20 years while I was in the industry. And it's so bad. I'm going to talk to a class at TCU next week.
Nice.
That Ed Ireland, an old friend, has taught over there for a long time. And I would love to do more of that, although I know on campuses it can be controversial to actually, tell the truth about energy anymore.
Right.
But Ed and his class, it's a mature bunch of students, and so but our industry. Part of it is these corporations don't want to say anything that's controversial at all.
Right.
And so, God, these major oil companies spend tens of millions of dollars every year on advertising that doesn't tell anything about the real story of the oil and gas business. And that's their 95% of their spend every year is on TV ads that make you feel good.
Right.
And but so little is spent on education. IPAA has had a program, that gets into the actual schools and try to teach kids STEM subjects and things about the industry for many years. And it's a great program that's incredibly underfunded because their member companies won't give the money to make it really a national kind of program.
Right.
And so, kids get out of school and all they ever, my kids got out of high school and had they not, been my kids, would have never heard anything about the oil and gas industry except for the Exxon Valdez.
Right.
And kids who graduated high school over the last 10 years learned nothing but the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And, and now they're learning nothing but carbon emissions. Right. Because nobody in our industry bothers to try to counter the message. And I shouldn't say that. I mean, there are CEOs now. Like I mentioned Nick DeLulius little bit ago. Chris Wright up in Colorado does a great job.
Sheffield from Pioneer.
Huh?
Yeah, Sheffield from Pioneer.
Oh, Scott Sheffield. Yeah, he's terrific. And, so there are some of them that will really get out there and talk.
Yeah.
But man, there's CEOs in this industry who I actually worked with and know.
Wow.
And worked with during my career who will not give me an interview. and I, you won't talk to me. I mean, my goodness, where's the danger in talking to me?
I don't know.
Piece for you.
I'm taking a chance here. Dave, but I may end up on your absurdity of the day after we publish this podcast.
Maybe I'm scaring them off. But it's just so weird to me. I don't know. I did also a radio program that airs in about, oh man, my internet connection's getting unstable again. Can you hear me okay?
You're doing great now.
Okay, good. I don't know what's going on with it. But anyway, I actually co-host a radio program and we're in about 10 different markets now. And we have the greatest guests, And I mean, we had Tom Fry from the Institute for Energy Research on last week. We had lots from IPAA the week before. And so there are all these advocates for the industry who do a great job talking about it, and messaging about it. But when you have 98% of the news media and the entertainment industry arrayed against you and all the big social media companies trying to ensure that the articles you write don't get wide distribution, which Google does to me all the time. Really, they take the time to do it to me. Think about
congratulations,
how obsessive they are.
My opinion of you went up.
But yeah, so it becomes, so the only way for the industry to actually really do any kind of national education on it would be to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to do it. You'd have to do that because the news media is not going to echo what you say, like it does with the Sierra Club and the opposition. So it's just, these companies, the management teams don't see it as their biggest priorities. They're all focused on quarterly results and very little planning beyond a year or two out. And they just don't, I think most of them, again, with the exceptions we've mentioned here, don't feel they have an obligation to educate people about the business they're in.
Right.
And I think that's wrongheaded. I think they do have an obligation, even if their board of directors doesn't want them to do it.
Right.
And I know a lot of them, have board members who will try to get them fired if they do.
Right.
But I just think if you're in that position at a company,
right,
you have a duty. You have a duty to your company and your industry to make sure that the public has some accurate perceptions about what it is you're doing for our society. Because it's a great story. The oil and gas industry has an incredible story to tell if it would just do it.
When we're talking about hypocrisy, we're talking about the ESG movement has just crimped capital coming into, I believe I was seeing some number, and I'm throwing this out there. We need trillions of dollars in order to just replace the normal decline curve. And we're not going to have it. And so the ESG movement is causing all of these ESG investors not to invest.
Right.
How do we change that narrative to them?
Well, I think it's beginning to change. And so part of the problem has been the activism that's been so successful. But another big part of the problem was all the capital that the shale industry burned through over the last decade, right? And failed to deliver on profits and investor returns that it should have been more focused on delivering. And so there was that frenzy to dramatically increase production that from like 2015 to 2019 that's now gone.
Right.
But yes, you've scared off a lot of potential investors, but now that prices are stronger and the returns are coming back and all these companies are paying bigger dividends now and engaging in stock buyback programs, you're starting to see pressures on companies like BlackRock is a great example. Having a lot of pressure to increase investment now in fossil fuel production. And so I think it's coming back in large part because the industry is too to ignore right now. And
Right.
the whole sector is performing so well. And I don't see much prospect that prices are going to go much lower anytime soon. In fact, I think, we could be at 150 before the end of this year in reality. Unless we have a major recession, then all bets are off. But, it just feels like we're entering a period of time now where that investment's going to start coming back. And the reality is the world, whether it understands it or not, needs that investment to come back.
Right.
Because otherwise we're going to be faced with a structural shortage of crude oil for the next decade. And, if you like $5 gasoline at the pump, well, get used to it.
I think we're in for a rough ride. Buckle up.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's going to be a horrible ride coming around the corner. And I think that there's a new matrix coming around for pricing, and used to be supply and demand used to be pretty easy. When you're taking a look at Henry Hub, you're looking at supply, we're going over here. That new matrix is just absolutely mind-boggling between geopolitical regulations, political. You got, commitments from the Biden administration to go over here and say, we're going to ship you all the LNG you want, and then come back within 24 hours and say, oh, by the way, I'm not going to give you any kind of regulation help. This whole pricing matrix, I'm having a hard time. Trying to figure that bad dog out.
No, and you know what? Everybody in the industry is having a hard time figuring it out too.
Yeah.
And because it's just it's changing so rapidly, and every day brings new factors to play, and the geopolitics of it all is shifting now. All these trade relationships. I mean, the Biden administration is pushing India and Saudi Arabia into the China and Russia sphere of influence now, with the incredibly grossly negligent foreign policy that is inexcusable for any presidential administration. And I agree with you. I think we're in for a rough ride, and it's largely because of this lunatic president that we have.
Okay, last question. We're running out of time because people normally fall asleep during my podcasts. and I got a question for you. As we sit here and you take a look, I don't want to play chess against Putin. Aristoslav, I did I do a horrible Putin imitation. I almost sound like one of the Godfather, hey, you want my gas? And she goes, that's a horrible, don't ever do that again. So when Aristoslav, says, don't do it, I have to say, yes.
Yeah, it's time to stop doing it. Yes,
it is time. But when we sit here and take a look at, Putin and how everything is going from that aspect, he's tying the ruble to gold. And he is smart about making India, who's not going to wean off of his oil, to the ruble.
Right.
And now Saudi
and
Arabia,
these other BRICS nations as well. He's trying to influence all of them, Brazil,
What do you think about them, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China, pulling away the dollar? I mean,
that would be disastrous, of course. The U.S. dollar has been the currency, the global currency of choice now in energy trading for so long. And I think that's a great way if you want to invoke sanctions on the United States. If you're Vladimir Putin, that would be the best way to do it, to really diminish the value. It would just tremendously devalue the dollar globally. And so, it's just kind of retaliation for the sanctions we've imposed. And I don't blame the Biden administration for doing that. Putin's war is inexcusable, and the atrocities they're committing is just horrible. And, but he's in such a strong geopolitical position. So particularly with Europe not having the ability to sanction his energy.
No.
Even 6 weeks into this war now, they're funding his war. And people don't like me saying that, but it's true. They are $20 billion a day or something like that. And, So yeah, he's in such a strong position that he can retaliate in that way. And you know, that BRICS group of countries is very influential economically and where energy is concerned. And so, yeah, it's dangerous, very dangerous for our country.
We got about one more minute. And what's next for David? What is coming around the corner for you?
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of a guy that just plugs away and tends to stumble into things. So no telling what I might stumble into here in the future. But right now I'm feeling pretty good about where I am. So
sounds fantastic. I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to having lunch with you over there with Ryan and RT and
me too.
else.
That'll be fun.
We'll have a regular hoot, and we'll even invite DRW down and say, hey, come on down.
Bring him on down.
Yeah. And so again, I've got so many more questions for you. I hope you don't mind coming back sometime.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah. I'd love doing these things. So anytime.
And my goal is to steal more of your stuff, be on your absurdity of the day. And I'm just kidding. Anyway, thank you very much for coming by the Energy News Beat podcast.
Yeah.